Okay, let's unpack this. We have a stack of sources today detailing a situation where a massive military procurement decision has spilled over
And not just spilled over, it's become a huge diplomatic rift.
between two of the world's closest allies, Canada and the United States. So this deep dive is for you, our listener, to really understand how Canada's choice between the U.S. F-35 and the Swedish Gripen fighter jet is becoming this fundamental test.
A test of national sovereignty. And economic independence, too.
Exactly. We aren't just talking about, technical specs here. This is about trust, money, and control. The mission for us is to really dissect this source material and show you how a defense deal became such a flashpoint.
And it all started with one specific moment.
A hook.
Yeah.
Right. A
Yeah.
surprisingly aggressive move where the U.S. ambassador publicly linked Canada's choice of jet directly to its entire future trade relationship with the U.S.
What's so fascinating is just how quickly it all shifted. From a military hardware purchase to a full-blown economic ultimatum.
Usually allies talk about interoperability, right?
Correct. Of course. They encourage it. But this goes so far beyond encouragement. This is Washington using its economic muscle to dictate Canada's long-term defense strategy.
Let's jump right into that standoff. The context, for everyone listening, is that Ottawa, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, had already kind of started down the F-35 path.
He'd signed an initial contract.
Yeah.
For 16 aircraft.
Right. But the Prime Minister is, he's clearly signaling he might press pause. He seems to believe there's a better option out there, one that serves Canada's, unique geographic and industrial interests.
And the response from the U.S. was remarkably blunt.
At the Munich Security Conference.
Exactly. The U.S. ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, delivered the message. And this wasn't some private diplomatic note. It was a public declaration. He said that if Canada does not follow through and purchase the F-35,
it should not expect any trade agreements with the United States.
Any. The word was any.
Now, hold on a second. Isn't that just, high-level international politics? If Canada goes with a non-U.S. plane for its main fighter, wouldn't you expect some trade consequences? Or is the language here really crossing a line?
Oh, the sources are crystal clear on this. That language crosses the line from alliance management to diplomatic coercion.
Coercion, that's a strong word.
It is. Alliances are supposed to be built on trust, on mutual respect. They allow sovereign nations to pick the equipment that best suits their needs, especially when, as the sources show, the U.S. option has some very serious, very documented flaws.
So, to tie it to trade.
To tie a defense decision to fundamental trade access, threatening the economic backbone of the country, it just reframes the entire decision.
Yeah.
It forces Canada to ask a very uncomfortable question. Is our sovereignty conditional on our shopping choices?
That sets the table perfectly, because while the U.S. is pushing this hard, the source material, and a lot of it is from U.S. officials themselves, shows the F-35 program is facing some pretty serious internal challenges. We have to acknowledge its advantages, the stealth, the network connectivity. But why are Canadian leaders even rethinking this if it's so advanced?
They're rethinking it because those technical advantages are getting buried under two enormous problems. The insane cost and the low reliability.
So it's expensive and it doesn't always work.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yes.
yes, the cost of just owning and operating the F-35 is reaching epic proportions, and the plane itself is grounded far too often.
We saw this confirmed in a U.S. Senate hearing, actually. Senator Roger Wicker was pretty candid. He acknowledged that F-35s are frequently grounded, often unfit for missions.
And the readiness rate is nowhere near what was promised.
Not even close. When you're spending billions, you expect a reliable deterrent, and the internal reports suggest that reliability just isn't there yet.
And that operational failure is made so much worse by the financial side of it. The U.S. Government Accountability Office, the GAO, reports that repair and maintenance costs are already over budget by more than $6 billion.
$6 billion over budget.
And the program is 5 years behind schedule. It's not just late, it's bleeding money just to keep the current planes flying. The F-35 has basically become a financial black hole.
So the F-35 framework has two kinds of failure, really. A technical failure of readiness and a fiscal failure of cost control. But the sources suggest both of those might be secondary to the political dependency.
Ah, yes.
The dependency that's baked right into the system itself. And this is where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about technological control.
That is the absolute core of the political question. All the core software, the source code, the critical technologies. For the F-35, they all remain entirely under U.S. control.
Which means?
It means Canada cannot independently upgrade, patch, or even maintain its own jets without explicit real-time approval from Washington.
And the mechanism for that control is something called ALIS, the Autonomic Logistics Information System. For listeners who don't follow defense tech, what exactly is ALIS? Why is it such a big deal?
ALIS is the absolute control mechanism. I mean, think of it as a massive centralized computer system that handles everything. Maintenance schedules, parts inventory, detailed operational data.
Thing?
It monitors, it controls, and this is the critical part, it can potentially disable any F-35 anywhere in the world. All the flight paths, maintenance records, sensor data, it all gets sent directly to servers in the United States.
That sounds like a veto button.
That's exactly what it is. European defense experts actually have a name for this arrangement. They call it conditional sovereignty.
Conditional sovereignty.
Right. It means a country might legally own the physical airplane, but the actual ability to use it, the operational viability, the maintenance, the deployment, it's all dependent on a third party. The operational authority is in Washington. A simple administrative decision could render Canada's entire fighter fleet useless overnight.
And for anyone listening who thinks this is all just theoretical, that the U.S. would never use that power against an ally, well, the sources give us a powerful real-world example. It involves Denmark.
Another NATO partner.
And it really serves as a litmus test for Canada.
The Denmark case is impossible to ignore. It really demonstrates the immediate political consequences of this conditional sovereignty.
So what happened was, in March of last year, the U.S. unilaterally removed critical components from Denmark's F-35 fleet.
And transfer them to Israel.
And they did this without consulting or even informing the government in Copenhagen beforehand.
The political shockwave this sent through Denmark was enormous. The Danish government was powerless to stop it. Even though that transfer ran directly counter to Denmark's own foreign policy in the Middle East, they had no recourse because the U.S. controls the whole system through ALIs.
And that led to a very famous, very sobering quote from MP Rasmus Jarlov. He used to be a big F-35 supporter.
He was.
He said, "We thought we were buying fighter jets. In reality, we are only leasing them, and the keys are in American hands."
That quote should have been a cold shower for every government, considering the F-35. The question for Canada is simple, and it's urgent. Is Ottawa prepared to accept a scenario where Washington could just reallocate parts from Canada's jets without even a phone call?
Because the U.S. owns the underlying infrastructure.
Exactly. That kind of reliance makes your foreign policy vulnerable for the next 3 decades.
Which brings us directly to the alternative path, the one being offered by Sweden, which tries to solve this whole sovereignty problem.
And offers a massive economic boost at the same time.
Right, and this wasn't some quiet business pitch. The King and Queen of Sweden, along with the chair of Saab, made an official state visit to Canada with the Gripen proposal. That's a high-stakes diplomatic move in its own right.
The Swedish pitch is just. It's fundamentally different from Lockheed Martin's. They are offering a foundational industrial partnership. It's centered on guaranteed autonomy. It's not just a sale.
And the industrial promise is what really makes it stand out. Saab is offering technology transfers, building full assembly and production facilities right on Canadian soil.
And the creation of up to 10,000 high-quality domestic jobs in the aerospace sector.
Let's talk about what those 10,000 jobs really mean, because it's important.
It is. These aren't just low-level assembly line jobs. We're talking high-tech, long-term careers, engineering, software development, specialized manufacturing.
It moves Canada from being just a customer to a producer.
Exactly. And by contrast, the F-35 deal offers, what, a few hundred component supply jobs? And the sources note those are subject to political pressure. They could be shifted back to the U.S. at any time.
And the idea is that Canada could become a production hub, maybe manufacturing Gripens for export to, say, Ukraine or smaller NATO countries.
It's about building a national industrial strategy, not just buying a piece of equipment.
And that strategy is reflected in the design of the Gripen itself.
Absolutely. Sweden learned a hard lesson during the Cold War. Political independence requires total control over your defense technology. With the Gripen, Canada would own the source code.
So Ottawa could decide on upgrades, maintenance, everything.
Independently, without asking Stockholm for permission. And there is no external monitoring system like LLS. None.
That autonomy means Canada avoids the risk of its supply chain being weaponized by a, let's say, an increasingly unpredictable neighbor. And beyond the control aspect, the Gripen's design seems purpose-built for Canada's environment.
It really does. The Gripen was designed for challenging conditions. It operates reliably in the Arctic and extreme cold, And crucially, it can take off and land on short runways,
Or even snow-covered highways.
which is ideal for patrolling Canada's huge, rugged northern territory. The F-35, on the other hand, it was designed for big, fully equipped military bases or aircraft carriers.
Let's bring the cost comparison into focus because the raw numbers here are, well, they're undeniable. While the initial F-35 unit price is about $85 million.
The total cost of ownership is the real killer.
Right. Canada's own Auditor General estimates that owning and operating 88 F-35s over 30 years could reach a staggering $50 billion.
$50 billion. And most of that money just leaves Canada and goes straight to Lockheed Martin in the U.S. But the real structural problem is the cost per flight hour, the CPFH.
Okay, so how do they compare?
The F-35 is incredibly expensive to operate. We're talking between $35,000 and $47,000 per flight hour.
$47,000 an hour. Wow. Now, compare that to the Gripen-E.
Independent data from joint NATO exercises where countries operate both shows the Gripen costs about $8,000 per flight hour.
8,000.
So you multiply that difference upwards for $39,000 an hour across a 30-year fleet lifespan. The operational savings alone are astronomical. They could dwarf the initial purchase price.
And Canada is already paying for infrastructure, too.
That's right. The U.S. has required Canada to redesign hangars and bases at Cold Lake and Baguetteville just for the F-35. That's costing hundreds of millions, and it won't even be done until 2031. It's a systemic lock-in before the planes even show up.
We should also touch on the internal Canadian debate, because the politics here are pretty murky. You see a clear case of potential conflict of interest from retired General Tom Lawson.
He was warning against operating two different fighter platforms.
Which seems reasonable on the surface until the source reveals he served as an advisor to Lockheed Martin for 6 years.
Right, that raises serious questions about the objectivity of his advice to the government. But you juxtapose that against a very powerful, highly symbolic reversal.
Yes. Retired Lieutenant General Andre Deschamps. He was an early, very vocal proponent of the F-35.
He was one of its biggest champions.
And now he has publicly called for canceling the initial contract.
And his reasoning is incredibly compelling because it comes from someone who understood the F-35's original appeal. He cited the excessive level of control from the U.S. as the main reason he changed his mind.
So when a high-ranking military figure who once defended the plane now warns against the dependency it creates,
That message about political risk is just impossible to ignore.
if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the risk is relying on long-term political assurances from an ally that is becoming more and more unpredictable.
The sources point out that political figures in the U.S., like Donald Trump, have openly floated ideas like turning Canada into the 51st state.
You can't just dismiss that.
No. Relying on stable relations for 3 decades under that kind of political volatility, it becomes a monumental gamble.
So the choice facing Prime Minister Carney is stark, isn't it?
It is, except the short-term pressure from the U.S., which might mean tariffs, trade tension in exchange for guaranteed industrial growth and independent defense capacity with the Gripen. Or choose the familiar but deeply dependent F-35 path and just bet that U.S. foreign policy will stay friendly and reliable for the next 30 years.
So what does this all mean? The defense budget is there. The money is approved. The question isn't whether Canada can afford the jets. It's whether it has the resolve to choose its own path, to protect its long-term sovereignty, even when it's facing aggressive diplomatic threats from its closest neighbor.
The U.S. ambassador, when he issued that ultimatum, he was defending the commercial interests of Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
He wasn't defending collective security among allies. The choice Canada makes here is less about radar capabilities and much more about defining the true meaning of national autonomy within NATO.
So if ownership of a major defense system like the F-35 can be unilaterally undermined by a simple diplomatic or administrative decision, does that concept of interoperability, does it risk becoming just a euphemism for dependence? And what other critical technologies, communications, energy might be controlled by a similar mechanism down the line? That's the provocative thought we'll leave you with for this deep dive.